The first important thing you don't want to miss in Act 1 is the spider swarm pet. How would you like to have a bunch of spiders as allies? Well, these little guys find their strength in numbers, with a max of 5, each with 6 health. To get them, there's a cliff right outside the grove, and at the top of that is a little camp. On the right side of that camp is a rock with a ton of spiders surrounding a pouch. If you get the pouch, inside is a spider egg, which you can actually drop on the ground and then attack to break open, and you'll have 4 spider minions at your command. It's really cool, although I wish you could summon them over and over, but it's just a one-time thing. You get to enjoy having a swarm of spiders following you around for a bit. Coming in at number 2 is the Quasit pet. Now, the Quasit pet can be summoned from the Scroll of Summon Quasit. You can find this scroll in one of the boxes in the cellar of the alchemist's house located in the Blighted Village. I suggest learning the spell instead of using the scroll because the scroll is a one-time use, but if you learn it, it's actually a ritual spell, meaning it doesn't use a spell slot and it can't be used during combat anyway, so you can use it as many times as you want. It's a permanent Quasit pet that's actually really useful. Besides being an extra body that can take hits and attack, it's also completely immune to poison, which can be very helpful against the spiders that are also below the town. It can also disarm traps pretty well because it has a +3 bonus, and not only that, but it also has invisibility and scare, so this pet is actually pretty amazing. And if you like that tip, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 videos. Number 3 is the Necromancy of Thay. This book is in the room hidden behind the ornate mirror in the room where you just found the Quasit. You'll need to answer a few questions correctly, and then the ornate mirror will let you pass. Once inside, you'll find a locked and barred door with a couple of traps protecting this book. Use a character proficient with lockpicking and disarming to get past it and pick up the book. Once you have it, you'll need to find a dark amethyst in order to open it. The nearest one is in the Whispering Depths, which is below the Blighted Village. You can just take the well and go down there. There's also one in Act 3 if you missed this one, but once you place the amethyst in the book, you'll need to pass several checks, eventually leading to learning forbidden knowledge. Now, some of these checks are actually pretty high rolls. I think it eventually gets up to 20, so you'll want to be quick saving before the roll, and then after you succeed, I think there's a total of 3 rolls. If you're a sorcerer, when opening the Necromancy of Thay book, you can instead choose the class options of sorcerer and dialogue, which are charisma based rather than wisdom. It's gonna be much easier as a sorcerer. At the end of these rolls, you're gonna walk away with the spell Speak with Dead learned, but there is actually more to the book, however, but not until Act 3. But the reason you'll want to do this now, though, is so that you have the book, because you can't go back, and then eventually, by having this book, you'll learn how to summon an army of ghouls with it from the spell Dance Macabre in Act 3. So definitely pick this up if you're interested in having that spell later. All right, number 4 is Second Marriage. If you're looking for a zombie pet right here, right now, look no further. This amazing zombie summon has a buff called Undead Fortitude, causing it to come back to life instead of dying, unless the killing blow was radiant or a critical hit. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to its offensive abilities, he just has Slam, which does 4 to 9 damage, so he's kind of just a meat bag when it comes to hits. However, to summon your zombie, you just need an item called Second Marriage, which can be used over and over, only using an action. The one downside of this, though, is that the zombie only lasts 10 turns. Not too bad, really, considering you could just resummon him after 10 turns, and 10 turns is a pretty good chunk of time. Now, in order to get Second Marriage, you'll need to save Mayrina from the hag and get the hag's hair. So go into the witch's lair, and after you've let the hag get away, there's gonna be a wand in the second area called Bitter Divorce. Grab that wand and the other valuables you're interested in, and then exit through the mushroom ring and head towards the coffin, and you're gonna find Mayrina next to her husband's corpse. You can then use the wand to resurrect him as a zombie, and you're gonna get a few choices of what to do with the wand, and I recommend you keep it so that you can summon a zombie at will for the rest of the game, and I think that's just perfect for a necromancer build. It doesn't even require a corpse, and then, pair this with the Necromancy of Thay, and you've got a really nice necromancer build coming together, which is really cool. Number 5 is Auntie Ethel's hair. Similar to what we just talked about, if you get Auntie Ethel to low health but don't kill her during the Save Mayrina quest, she'll eventually cause a cutscene to start and offer you a deal to spare her life. In return, she will give you her hair, which can give you +1 to an ability score of your choice. You can also save Mayrina as well if you roll well enough, which I recommend you do because it's going to unlock Second Marriage, like we just talked about, among other things. Be careful though, because sparing the hag as an Oath of Vengeance paladin actually breaks your oath. So make sure that there's another party member nearby to make that person trigger the dialogue instead. So whoever is in like melee range is going to basically trigger this dialogue. All right, number 6 is Summon Ogre Horde. This was so cool when I stumbled upon this. So in the Blighted Village, there are 3 ogres camped around a dead tiefling. If you engage in conversation and choose the right dialogue options, you can get these 3 ogres to fight for you for free. You're gonna have to roll a 20, but you can convince them that their reward for fighting for you is going to be them being able to eat the enemies that you slay. So they're going to agree, and they're going to give you an item called Lump's Horn, and all you gotta do is, like, when you're in combat, just blow the horn, and these 3 massive ogres are going to come help you and fight your enemies. However, after each summon, there is a catch. They're going to say, oh, this isn't enough food, why should we keep fighting for you? And you're gonna have to convince them to fight for you again. So after you summon them the first time, you can tell them, okay, next time you can eat the enemy, but we're also gonna give you like 1,000 gold, right, after the next fight, right? So you don't have to give them gold now, you just promise it later. So you can just kind of keep these ogres working for you, kind of just give them a carrot to chase after, and they'll just keep fighting for you, which is really cool. And then number 7 is Awakened. Well, technically this is an Act 2 permanent buff. It's sort of close to Act 1, so I'm gonna include it here. This can be earned within the Githyanki Creche in the Rosy Morn Monastery. It allows you to use all of your Illithid powers as bonus actions. If you go into the purification device and pass all the checks to remain within it, you'll exit with an incredibly powerful permanent buff, allowing you to use Illithid powers as bonus actions. I wanted so badly to get rid of my parasite. That's why I stuck in the machine when I did this originally. And when it failed, I literally lost all hope and just started consuming all my extra tadpoles because I was like, well, what's the point? I can't get rid of this thing. And good thing I did, seeing how I just, that's how you get those Illithid powers. And I never even knew that Illithid powers were actions. I always thought they were bonus actions. So, because I always had Awakened, but it's incredibly powerful to have your Illithid powers as bonus actions. Feel free to quick save before the roll and after you succeed to get through, I believe, 3 or 4 rolls that you have to get through. All right, number 6 is Dark Mind and Slave Mind. In Act 1, you can find 2 minds suspended in cerebrospinal fluid. These are important to pick up because later on in Act 2, you have a chance to connect them to the Mind Archive interface in the Mind Flayer colony. You get the rare opportunity to hear what these 2 minds have to say if you do, which I bet it's very rare that anyone actually carries these all the way to that. Now, in total, there are 6 brain jars to be found within the Mind Flayer colony, plus these 2 from the Nautiloid. There are 8 total that you get to listen to in Act 2. These minds are called the Butchered Mind, Closed Mind, True Mind, Willing Mind, Dark Mind, Slave Mind, Fresh Mind, and Waking Mind. Collect them all and hear their stories. All right, number 9, we have She Cannot Be Caged. If you save Saza the Goblin from the Emerald Grove, if you remember, she's in a cage kind of in the back, she's going to be in the Goblin Camp later, and then even after that, it'll be the Moonrise Towers. If you spare her / save her from death every time you run into her, if you manage to keep her alive in every single location, every time you see her, you're going to eventually get an achievement called She Cannot Be Caged. So that's kind of cool. Saving her from the Grove is possible to do. Basically, you can persuade the guards that that Saza is just leading you to the camp. She's like a traitor. So it is possible to get Saza out of the Emerald Grove without violence. So it's pretty cool. Definitely something worth trying. It's not the easiest thing to sneak Saza out of the Grove. You have to win a couple rolls. All right, number 10 is Bual's Benediction. Now, within the depths of the Underdark are a group of Kuatoa worshipping Bual. If you sacrifice a teammate to Bual, your remaining party members will all get a permanent buff, granting advantage on attack rolls against bleeding creatures as long as there is a Kuatoa to worship Bual. Now, the way I would go about doing this, if you're planning on doing this, I would say I would go accept the Paladins of Tyr's quest to slay Karlach and then sacrifice her here. It's basically 2 birds stoned at the same time. This buff is really good when paired with a Wildheart Barbarian who uses Tiger's Bloodlust. This causes 3 targets to start bleeding for 2 turns. So that gives your whole party advantage on attack rolls against those targets for 2 turns. I think that's very nice and totally worth it. Now, you don't have to sacrifice Karlach. I just saw a synergy there. You can sacrifice anyone of a party member that you bring down there for this buff. So definitely consider doing that. Once you decide to sacrifice them, you will have to fight them. So be prepared to 3v1 your one teammate that you chose to sacrifice. And also, unfortunately, if one of your party members dies, they do lose Bual's Benediction. Unfortunately, it would be great if it persisted through death, but alas, it does not. All right, number 11 is Free Us. Now, in Act 1, you'll want to be sure to free Us, the Intellect Devourer, before leaving the Nautiloid. You want to do this because later on in Act 2, you'll be able to free Us again and get him as a permanent pet. So take that elevator when you exit the first room of the game and gently remove Us. And make sure not to lobotomize him either, because that will give him an ailment later in Act 2. Also, make sure he doesn't die while you have him in Act 1, because if he dies, then he's dead, and he's not going to be in Act 2. All right, number 12 is Silver Sword of the Astral Plane. This weapon is one of the best in the game and extremely powerful on Lae'zel because the sword is more powerful when held by a Githyanki or someone disguised as a Githyanki. Now, it would normally become available in Act 3, however, you can get this pretty easily in Act 1 by using Disarming Attack on Voss while invisibility is cast on you. Now, it will take a few attempts to get, so be prepared to quick save, but it's well worth it if you're looking for an overpowered weapon in Act 1. Your character who did the Disarming Attack, probably Lae'zel, is going to die after looting, so make sure before you attempt this, you have Withers already unlocked at your camp, so all you do is just go back to camp and purchase a Resurrection, and the sword is yours. Now, as a disclaimer, you really shouldn't have this sword this early, so if it's your first playthrough, I'd recommend not doing this because there's history behind this sword, but ultimately, it's up to you. All right, number 13 is Loviatar's Love. In the Goblin Fortress, there's an NPC called Abdarak who worships Loviatar. He will offer you to participate in some torture. Now, if you endure it all by succeeding all rolls, you will be rewarded with a buff called Loviatar's Love, which gives you a +2 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws every time your health drops below 30%. This is a pretty sweet buff considering when you're close to death, you could use a little help. Also, a really cool trick with this is that if you take off your armor for this torture, this is actually going to add modifiers to your rolls, making the rolls easier to succeed. So definitely recommend doing that. Now, Loviatar's Love is not entirely permanent though. If you ever die and are revived, it's going to be gone, which seems to be the case for a lot of these otherwise permanent buffs, such as Bual's Benediction. Number 14 is See Invisibility. If you save Volo from the Goblin camp, and he'll come to your camp and offer to get the Mind Flayer tadpole out of your head, claiming it's just behind the orbital socket. Instead of removing the tadpole, however, he's going to remove your eye. Oopsie. Well, Volo, being the good guy he is, replaces your eye with one that can see invisibility. Pretty amazing, actually. There's no longer a need to cast Create Water when you can permanently see anything invisible. Very nice, actually. And then finally, at number 15, we have Halsin. Now, of course, I'm sure you know who Halsin is, the druid who's captured within the Goblin camp, but you should actually try to save Halsin, because if you don't, you're actually going to miss out on a really interesting and unique quest chain later in Act 2, which involves defending a portal from waves of enemies. It actually eventually leads to the option of having him join your party. I think this quest is cool enough to warrant saving him at least once on one playthrough. Number 16 is Damon, the blacksmith in the Grove. Now, before you make your decision on helping the druids or the tieflings, consider how important Damon is if he's alive. You're going to need him if you want to cure Karlach of her broken infernal engine, and as a bonus, keeping him alive means he'll be get the Harper base in Act 2, and he'll be able to craft